Begin our summer series on people of the Bible. And today we're going to consider Paul. We are hoping that their faith stories will give shape to your faith story. Now there's a lot about Paul we don't know. So check out this 2-minute video on Paul.
St. Paul, or Paul the Apostle, was one of the first Christian missionaries, and his writing forms a great deal of the New Testament. Little is known about Paul's early life, but it is known that he was ethnically Jewish and was a Roman citizen. His original name was Saul, and he was believed to be from the city of Tarsus in modern-day Turkey, but was raised in Jerusalem. According to the Bible, Paul was dedicated to the persecution of the early disciples of Jesus, but he converted to Christianity between 31 and 36 AD. His conversion occurred on the road to Damascus, where he was temporarily blinded after he had had a vision of the resurrected Jesus. He then began describing himself as a servant of God and an apostle of Jesus. Paul stated that he had received the Gospels he wrote from a personal revelation from Jesus himself. After his conversion, he traveled to Damascus, where he was baptized, then traveled to Jerusalem, where he met James of Jerusalem and St. Peter. He later met with Barnabas, a fellow disciple in Antioch in southern Turkey, who Paul traveled to Judea with when a famine occurred in 45 AD. Antioch became a center of Christianity, and it was here that the followers of Jesus were first referred to as Christians. According to the Acts of the Apostles, Paul undertook 3 journeys, preaching around the Mediterranean, and then traveled to Rome, where he was to stand trial for accusations of treason. He arrived in Rome in around 60 AD, where he preached whilst under house arrest. Paul was beheaded in Rome in around 65 AD during the reign of Nero, and his remains are said to be held in the tomb of the Basilica of St. Paul in Rome. Paul is undoubtedly one of the most important figures in the history of the Western world. His letters and texts are some of the earliest Christian documents in existence, and 13 of the 27 New Testament books are written by him.
We'll get back to Paul in a few minutes. On Ash Wednesday this past year, my wife, Amber, said to the children it was time to get ready for church. And Simon, our son, said, "I don't want to go to church." And Thea, our daughter, said, "Nobody wants to go to church." When Amber told me that story, I laughed. I thought that was cute. It was one of those parents' awe moments, you know. But then I kept thinking about that conversation. And it dawned on me, our daughter is right on. Virtually nobody wants to go to church. I wonder, why is that? In a recent study by the Barna Group, published on March 25th, they discovered that although church involvement was once a cornerstone of American life, it isn't anymore. Do you believe that? Yeah. When asked what helped people grow in the faith, church involvement didn't even make it in one of the top 10 slots. Instead, prayer, friends, family, reading the Bible, having children helped people grow in the faith, but church involvement was way down on the list. 49% said church involvement was important, but 51% said church involvement was not important. That has a huge effect on our culture, our morals, our politics, our schools, our businesses, our lifestyle, even and especially an effect on our churches. When asked, why don't you attend church? Across age and denomination, these 2 answers remained consistent at the top. 40% said, I don't find God in the church. And 35% said, church is not relevant to me personally. Whoa, wait a minute. People are not finding God in the church. And whatever the church is offering, it's not helping people, it's not relevant to helping people grow in the faith and their faith development. Houston, we've got a problem. A majority of those who do go to church, 61%, said they did not gain any significant or new insight regarding their faith when they last attended church. Did you hear that? Let me read that again. A majority of those who do go to church said they did not gain any significant or new insight regarding their faith when they last attended church. Is that your experience? Thankfully, millions of Americans attend church every week. But only 17% of the American population are in church on any given Sunday. The study revealed that regular church attendance used to be at least once a week, but now regular attendance is seen as once every 4 to 6 weeks. We've redefined what church attendance is. The Barna study also discovered there is a growing epidemic of loneliness in America right now. Only 1 in 10% say they go to church because they're looking for community. I wonder what the other 90% is looking for when they come to church. What are you looking for when you come to church? Most people say they don't find true community in the church. Instead, they find churches that are too concerned about money and power, too focused on rules, and too focused on politics. 88% said they want nothing to do with the church and are not looking to get involved with the church. 88%. The research reveals that there are two trends that are at odds with each other. Adults are aware of their real spiritual needs, yet they are increasingly dissatisfied with the church's attempt to meet those spiritual needs and are turning elsewhere. Houston, we have a serious problem. Now, the fastest growing religious group in America right now are the nuns. Not the N-U-Ns with the black habits. The N-O-N-E-S. According to Pew Forum, nuns are those who claim to have no church affiliation and have no desire to be affiliated with the church. According to Pew Forum, the nuns group is driven by the natural process of generation replacement. The newer generations are replacing the older generations. A third of all adults under 30 years of age have no religious affiliation, as compared to those just 1 in 10 who are 65 and older. Age. Our age has a lot to do with whether we see church as being important or not. The younger we are, the less important we see church to be. Here's how it breaks down. Religious affiliation. What this graph shows us is pretty revealing. On the bottom line, it reveals that 90% of those who are 65 or older claim to be affiliated with the church, not necessarily involved, but affiliated. But notice, when you go to those who are 50 to 64, only 84% claim to be affiliated with the church. And then if you move to the 30 to 49-year-olds, only 77% of that generation claimed to be affiliated with the church. But then look what happens between 18 and 29, 2/3. 67% of that population are not affiliated with the church. That means the older we are, the more important church is, but the younger we are, the less important church is. This trend is going to continue, with each successive generation being less and less affiliated with the church. Now, if you'd like to read this report from the Barna Group, I invite you to go to our webpage, check out Pastor's latest blog. I wrote an article, and I include this entire study in that blog. Or call the church office or email Jeannie. She'll send you a copy of it. Or mark on your Connect card. We'll see that you get a copy of this Barna report if you're interested. This past week, our Parents' Day ministry wrapped up with a celebration like they do at the end of each year. So I went out and met with the families and had a little conversation with them. And then afterwards, I had a little conversation with one of the dads from the Parents' Day Out ministry. We'll call him Jake, not his real name. But Jake and I had an interesting conversation. He said he's moved here from the Midwest for work. He said he loves the area. He loves the people. And he loves the culture. But then, as he shared all kinds of intimate things with me, he said that he's looking for a safe place to share his life experiences, both good and bad. He said he can't do that with people at work. Work is work. We talked about how challenging it is for him and his family right now. I asked him if he found a church home. He said no. He said, and we are not looking. Jake grew up in a Lutheran church. But he left the Lutheran church when he was a teenager. He said church just didn't do it for him. He left the church and he has no desire to come back. Now, there are many reasons for this. Let's just say church was not a good experience for Jake. My heart breaks now just telling you that story. I invited Jake to come here and worship anytime. I said, Jake, you are welcome anytime here at FLC. But then I wondered, would Jake find God here? Would Jake find what we offer beneficial to him and his family's faith development? That begs a question. What's going on here at FLC? Let's take a look. Here's a graph of our average worship attendance for the last 14 years. But take a look at what's been happening. In 2003, we had an all-time high of average worship attendance at 216. But notice, we've been on a steady decline ever since. So join with me in taking a look at these statistics we have here. And I wonder, whatever we were doing to grow the church in 2003, it stopped working. So I asked a number of people, what happened in 2003 that caused us to stop growing? I've heard all kinds of answers, but these two tend to come to the top. There are at least two key factors. One internal and one external. Let's take a look at the external factor. In 2003 or thereabouts, the oil companies would move people into the Lafayette area. Some of those people were Lutheran. And they would come and seek out a Lutheran church. They'd become involved in our church. They'd become members. They would find us. Our focus was to provide a Lutheran church experience with our Lutheran methods. Traditional worship, traditional Sunday school, traditional youth group, traditional committee structure, traditional role of the pastor. All we needed to do was to offer our Lutheran way of being and doing church, and people would participate. We grew mainly by membership transfer. This is what people have been telling me. I'm told the oil companies aren't bringing people to Lafayette area like that anymore. But oddly enough, people are still moving to Lafayette and the area. They just aren't Lutherans. They aren't even church people. In the same period that our church declined, Lafayette area grew. In 2002, up to 2013, just the zip code 70508 grew by 9,000 people. In 2000, the population was around 27,764, and in 2013, the population was 36,763. Those are the changing demographics, the external factor. The internal factor had to do with leadership. When a church begins to bump up to that 200 average worship attendance mark, unless the role and expectations of the pastor changes from being the caregiver to being the equipper of others who are caregivers, the church will experience a steady decline, just like we did. Now, most pastors, myself included, have been seminary trained to be caregivers, not equippers. And most seminary trained pastors will not admit to being burnt out. We just don't do it. Our egos will not allow us to admit when we are burnt out. And yet, consistently in talking with people, that's what they experienced during the last 10 years. Burnout by the leadership. That's what Kevin Martin says happens in his book, The Myth of the 200 Barrier. He says the focus and methods, if they don't change when a church nears 200 in worship, decline sets in. We are a textbook example of what happens when a church hits the 200 mark, but doesn't change its focus and its methods to continue that growth. If we consider our declining worship attendance over the last 10 years and commit to doing what we've been doing and not change anything, if we continue to focus on reaching just Lutherans and not the Jakes of the world, do you think we'll be here in 10 years? Probably not. I accepted this call a year and a half ago because I believe God called me here to turn this church around from declining to thriving. Doing whatever it takes to reverse the curse and to turn this church around. That's why I'm here. Why are you here? Our focus and our methods are critical for this turnaround. So let's adjust our focus. not on the Lutherans, but on the Jakes of the world. Let's adjust our methods not to grow Lutherans, but to grow disciples. Now, I was born a Lutheran. I was raised a Lutheran. I will always be a Lutheran. Nobody's going to change that. I deeply care about the future of the Lutheran Church, ELCA, both locally and nationally. But I realized a few years ago, I had to get over my Lutheranism. I had to get over the way I thought church should be done. I love this church. But change is needed so we can thrive once again. Look around this room. Luther and the Reformers challenged the traditions of the church when those traditions got in the way of helping people grow in the faith. They changed the focus and the methods of the church because they needed to. Folks, that's why we're adjusting our focus and our methods in worship. That's why we're adjusting our focus and our methods for our children's ministry. That's why we're changing our focus and our methods for adult spiritual faith formation through life groups. Now, I'm not here to grow a church. I'm here to grow people as disciples of Jesus. Are you interested? Let's reverse the curse of decline that we've experienced for the last 10 years. Let's make this a thriving church that's making a difference in the lives of the people here in Lafayette area. I don't know exactly what that looks like, so let's discover it together. That's what Paul was all about. He was all about growing people. He was all about making a difference in the lives of others because of the difference Jesus made in his life. Paul's our example for living the faith in 3 ways. First, Paul was motivated by a gratitude of what God had done for him. Paul knew he didn't deserve God's grace or love or mercy or forgiveness. Paul saw himself as the biggest sinner of all times because probably he persecuted the church. He killed Christians. He lived a life then, not out of duty or obligation, but as a privilege. Faith is a privilege. Second, Paul's faith was built on a personal experience of the transforming love of God in Christ Jesus. Everything Paul said and did was a result of his growing relationship with Jesus. Faith is a relationship with Jesus. And third, Paul planted seeds of faith. He shared God's love in simple and practical ways with everyone, no matter where he went. And that made all the difference. Faith is sharing God's love with others. If God can use somebody like Paul to plant seeds of faith, then God can certainly use somebody like you. Are you interested? Amen.